Today we're going to be replacing a toilet. You always want to install a low flow unit that has 1.6 gallons, or in this case we're going to install a 1.28 gallon per flush unit in this house. We know that this valve does not work, so today we're going to have to replace that valve. So we'll shut the water off to the whole house and drain as much water out of this tank as possible. Not all of the water flushes out when you operate the toilet itself. There's always a little bit of water in there. We've drained the tank. The next thing we want to do is remove the two bolts that hold the toilet down to the floor. Because every situation's a little bit different, what we're actually going to do here, rather than remove the water line that goes from the shutoff valve to the fill valve, which is inside the tank, we're actually going to take the fill valve off and leave the water line, the hard piped water line, standing attached already to the, or we'll leave it attached to the shutoff valve. So now that takes off or removes all the connections holding the toilet to the water line, toilet assembly to the water line, and to the floor. The last thing we're going to do is try to remove as much water as we can from the bowl itself, so we don't, this water is going to slosh around when we remove the toilet from the floor. So we'll, as I say, we'll try to get as much water out of there as possible. Now, once we removed as much water as we can from the bowl, then let's make sure all the parts are away. You can grasp the toilet right around where the seat bolts into the bowl. Okay. You just got to move it back and forth, loosen the seal, break the seal. Then I'm going to lift the toilet and set it over on the drop cloth. Okay. Well, you want to put something over the drain line to keep all the sewer gases out, and so you don't accidentally drop anything down in that hole. Now I'm going to remove the old shutoff valve. Whoops. Oops. If I spin this valve around, I see this handle, it's going to hit the wall. So I need to take this whole valve body apart. I think we may have to cut the handle. I'm actually just going to cut the handle off. There's always a little bit of residual water left in the water lines. In doing this operation, in addition to shutting the water off at the main supply for the house, you want to open up a faucet at the lowest point in the house to drain as much water from the water lines as possible. So now I'm going to put a little sealant around the entire pipe. Now, tighten this valve in place. Okay. And now would probably be a good time to make sure this water valve is shut off, and we can turn the main water supply back on for the house to make sure this connection in here is good to go. Now that we've turned the main water back on for the whole house, we can inspect this connection here, make sure everything is watertight here. And the next thing is to clean up the footprint for the old toilet, clean up the flange and the old wax ring that was here. Whatever kind of cleaner that you have on hand. The bolts that hold the toilet onto the flange are T-bolts. This T-bolt has a little nut which you can use once you slide the T-bolt in place. Get it in place. You can tighten that down, and that will help hold everything in a vertical position. One of the important features that you have to consider is the sealing of the toilet bowl to the flange in the floor. That is done with a wax ring. The wax ring is placed on the underside of the bowl. Press the wax ring down around the discharge port on the bowl, and once that is in place, then you can flip the bowl back over to the upright position and place it on the flange on the floor. Okay, once you get it set down on there, you can either push this toilet down to seal, to compress the wax ring. And as you do that, you want to make sure that this thing is positioned so the tank will wind up parallel to the wall. You don't want to turn this thing. You want to make sure this is coming straight out from the wall. Now I can just push down right here and seal it to the floor. It's a good idea to check this thing, make sure it's not rocking back and forth like this one appears to be rocking back and forth. I'm going to have to put some kind of a small plastic shim underneath the corner of the bowl to kind of stabilize everything in place. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just draw a pencil line here, and then we'll actually cut this shim. So now I want to check level. So that little shim underneath there will align the bowl, and once the tank gets attached to the bowl, everything will be lined up so it's level. Now that we have the toilet in a good, stable, level position, we can use the nuts, and in this case it's a plastic nut, threads on the T-bolts and holds the toilet onto the floor. Just make sure that they're snug. You don't have to over tighten these things. And then I can put a cap on there, protective cap over the bolt itself. Press that in place. You want to seal this tank to this bowl. So this seal, you can see the hex-shaped nut aligning with the hex nut here. This has been tightened on at the factory. I want to put this right on there like that. So that will seal the tank to the bowl. These nuts here, these bolts, go through the two holes in the back of the bowl to secure it in place. And I don't know if it's probably not really required, but I've taken some of this just as a little extra precaution to help seal everything in place. So now I can take this and rotate it up and down. Okay? There's a plastic washer that goes on the bolts. The bolt coming through the tank, through the back of the bowl. I want to put this rubber washer, plastic washer I should say, in place, and then a no-tool nut to tighten it in place. You don't want to over tighten these connections here because you don't want to break the bowl. The tank should actually fit down on the top of the bowl. I want to make sure it's level from side to side, and I can see now that it's got to go down on my left hand side. Making sure that the tank is parallel to the wall. So I got to move it a little bit. Now you have different lengths water lines. You want to make sure that the distance from the bottom of the fill valve to the top of that shutoff valve, you want to get one that's slightly longer than that. You don't want to stretch this thing in its final position. What I'm just tightening the water line here onto the shutoff valve here. I want to make this connection here. And I don't want to, there's a rubber gasket in here that'll actually seal it. I just want to go on a nice tight connection. It doesn't have to be really hard, but I think that's got it. I think that's should be watertight there. While that water's coming in, probably a good idea to check this just to make sure that it shuts off when it gets all the way up. We can adjust the position of the float. I want to make sure that this shutoff valve stops the water from flowing into the tank when the water has to stop 7/8 of an inch below the top of this overflow. First flush, check the water around the tank, water around the bowl. I want to attach the toilet seat to the toilet bowl itself. I use plastic bolts and plastic nuts that come up from the bottom. Provide a watertight seal between the bottom of the footprint of the bowl and the floor. Put that in place, and I think we're done.